I woke up the other day with my head in a fog. Another day gone by with no look and no job. I'm sick and tired of the living. Existing on the path of these is this there. Come on, let's get it on. That's what I say to myself. There's nothing about the buzz inside my head, and what the hell? Push wars, recalls, and duos every day. It's coming to a head. That's how I see it anyway. Can you dig it?
All right. Welcome to the 8th Note Sessions. I'm your host, Devin Mullen, and today we are joined by seriously cool guest, Eric Crittenden. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, for our upcoming Music Expo, you're going to be running a creative workshop alongside David Cloyd. Tell us a little bit about this workshop and what your angle of approach and it is going to be.
Well, I think what we will just want to talk about is the importance of collaboration, right? And thinking outside the box, but also not being afraid to reach out and to put people in positions to push the scene as a whole forward, right? We all have skills that transcend the stage. So we try to put those musical superpowers, as David likes to call it, together to help collaborate with people like Music is Art and corporations all across the country, really, to help put Buffalo artists in a position to succeed, which may or may not include the stage.
Beautiful. And you have a pretty extensive history working as an educator, working currently in the Buffalo public school system, being a founder of the Buffalo Center for Arts and Technology. You also gave a TED Talk, which is amazing. What I really liked about your sort of pedagogy on it was this connection of music and expressivity to our history as a species and how deep those roots run. I was curious, is that going to, this very basic human element of it, is that going to factor into how we're engaging with community collaboration?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the root. So it's the root of all things music, and music's, one of music's greatest power is to bring tens of thousands of people in mass. That's not related to religion in and of itself. It's its own expression of the universe. And nothing brings people together short of music. The two main mediums are music and church, right? So, it's just how it is. In my TED Talk, I talked about the first instrument being the voice, and then followed by drums and flutes, all to convey some kind of message to some other portion of some other society or tribe or village or whatever. And one way or the other, whatever it was I was intending to do through my music and through my calls and through my beats on the sticks, one way or the other, you're gonna know I was coming, or you were invited to come to me. And it's just paying it forward, man. Ain't nothing changed. We're still beating on the same rocks. We're still screaming the same chants. It's just, now you gotta have social media and shit.
I mean that's very true. Any theological student or any student of theater understands that the roots are in ritual. And that's absolutely true of music too. It's kind of the meeting point, right? So in addition to your educational background, you have an absolutely sterling musical resume, playing with acts like Jefferson Starship or Airplane, depending how they're feeling that particular day. The Doobie Brothers, G Love and the Special Sauce, and Sinbad, which I find really interesting. We have a question from Mike Shamil. Even though you only worked, you said in a pre-interview conversation once with G Love and the Special Sauce, what was how'd that process go? What was a memorable experience of it?
Well, the memorable experience about that and so many of the other folks that are on my resume is that I literally just had my sax with me and just kind of flashed it, for G Love and Special Sauce and the cats from Doobie Brothers and Starship and all that. I was literally out in the audience and just held up my sax like you know, are we? I mean, you know, I'm here for a reason. So, and 9 out of 10 times they would let me get up there and jam, and it was great. And that kind of just parlayed into a whole career for me, of where not only was I like sitting in with cats, but then I got asked to sit in, and then I started having them sit in my band. That's how like Chris Juke Joint was sort of born out of these jam sessions. And like, sort of once I proved myself as a cat that could hang, then they, you know, some of them wanted to start hanging with me, and then ultimately playing on my record. So
that's
it
a
worked.
beautiful thing. Do you recommend people do that as a networking tactic, or do you think it was just right time, right moment, right decision?
I think it was just right time, right moment. There was no forethought into it whatsoever. You know, in our pre-show interview, I was talking about the dude with the mullet who does Careless Whisper. That's thought out. You just don't like. You don't just happen to, like, you know what I mean, wind up in Paula's Donuts playing fucking Careless Whisper. Like, you just don't, do you know what I mean? It might be spontaneous once. It might be spontaneous once because you just smoked some great stuff and you're like, yeah, I'm going to go to Paula's Donuts and play Careless Whisper. But for him to build that like following on social media, it becomes thought out. That was never a forethought. That was never marketing for me. Like, ever. It was just one of those things where I had to play, and what I got out of it was the bigger the crowd, the better. You know,
you feed off that energy, kind of thing.
You feed off of that energy. You know, I played in front of 40,000 people, and that's just like complete insanity. You know, and I'm still here for it. You know what I mean? Like, that was it for me.
Beautiful. You were also the founder of the Buffalo Center for Arts and Technology. You're no longer working with them, moving on to other pursuits. But that said, even having left the organization, what impact do you think they continue to make on the community?
Well, it gives kids an outlet, you know. So many of these inner city schools, their art departments, their music departments are in a shambles. They're inequitable. It's not like out in the suburbs. I went to Sweet Home, you know, and we had tuxedos and new instruments and brand new marching band equipment. And we had musicals and A bands and B bands. And I mean, it was just in choruses and like jazz ensembles. And like, it was a real music program that was in alignment with an overall artistic vision, right? You cannot make that same assessment for Buffalo, sadly, or many inner city school programs, and that fills that BCAT fills that void. The Bidwell Strickland Corporation, for which it was born, was built on that very void. Give kids access to real art in a beautiful center built for artists, right? So that they can sort of experience music, like the beauty that it possesses. That's what BCAT stood for, and as the art director, that's what I did, right? Is I reached out to the local artists, who we know that can serve the community in the capacity that they're great at.
What impact does BCAT still have today, and why do we need organizations like BCAT?
Well, their whole purpose is to provide an outlet for people who wouldn't otherwise have that outlet. And whether you're talking about the art program or you're talking about the workforce development stuff, the medical coding, and whatever they're doing now, it's providing people with a chance at an experience of life that because of zip code, because of various tactics to separate people,
sure.
They don't ordinarily have that chance, you know. we're talking tuition-free workforce development, training, and coding, where you leave the building with a job. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. And same thing with the arts programming, right? There was all kinds of pathways into higher education programs and support and community and a family vibe in every class that was designed, because they were run by local artists that got it, that had a unique sense of Buffalo and a unique sense of their art, and a driving desire to mentor the people coming up. Every class that we created was instructed by instructors, some of whom are still there in different capacities, but like, Kevin Klein from Squeaky Wheel, like a cat that just got it. And that's the whole point. So its impact on the community is a big deal, because the arts program as a whole, the music program as a whole in inner city schools and in Buffalo, frankly, is inequitable. It's not consistent. And you just can't get the same experience that you can with a very focused, intended program that we had at BCAT that's still, to my knowledge, as focused and intended to this day.
Beautiful. And when we're talking about these social inequities, I mean, this is something that's pervasive, not just in terms of music education and the art education, but it's something that's really interwoven into the fabric of Buffalo itself. Something we talk about frequently on the show is the Great Berlin Wall of Buffalo music, separating certain music scenes like hip hop and rock pretty strongly in certain audiences. That said, we talked a little bit about what's happening in the Buffalo music scene currently and some of the acts that are really making waves on the national stage currently. And you talked about Griselda and Conway and Benny and all them is sort of changing the script a little bit on how they're marketing their music and sort of reinforcing a strong Buffalonian identity. Does this sort of change of things give you optimism for breaking down these barriers in the future, or does more need to happen?
Oh, no, absolutely. But I mean, yes and yes. Obviously, more needs to happen. But finally, folks like the Griselda organization and their pursuits, their fashion, everything that they do is well thought out. It's always Buffalo first, and it's always, they're sort of bringing each other up, right? Every rapper that's in the thing is very Wu-Tang like, for lack of a better explanation, very Grateful Dead like, for lack of a better explanation, right? Because everything is intrinsically and explicitly Griselda and West Side Gun and Conway, and everything, every sweatshirt, every sock, every song, every beat, it's all nuanced, but it's all Buffalo. And it's so impressive, A, and B, I mean, I know that since I came up in the 90s, we would always talk about that. It was like the alternative rock scene back then, but we always would talk about what's our sound. Like, we have this like weird, funky, soulful undercurrent that runs through our grunge, right? We had like a grunge scene. It wasn't grunge, right? It's just the imagination, but we had a sound, and nobody really was able to really put it together. Everybody had to dip, right? Everybody had to go, right? Rick had to go. Ani had to go. Even Robbie, Johnny, and all them, they had to go, right? But then Robbie brought that shit back here, and then that's the thing. Like, that was like my goal. Like, I was going to be the rock star, and I was going to come back. And after I was done being a rock star, and I was going to come back and like bless the whole city with opportunity and experience. Like, that was my sole purpose. You know what I mean? Sure. And Robbie is living that. Like, he is doing that. And I'm beyond grateful to be like, side by side with that dude at times, whether it's, being a performer at Music is Art or now in this capacity to curate an entire musical scene and community through the Expo and my collaboration with Buffalo Music Club. But yeah, like Griselda, they're organized, and I think that there is a lot more to go because we need to galvanize the whole city like that. We need to, there's no reason why we're not Motown. There's no reason why we're not Seattle. There's no reason why we're not Nashville. There should be no excuse, I should say. There's plenty of reasons, but there's really no excuse. I mean, our sound is so unique. And I used to say in my touring days, I put Buffalo musicians up against anybody in the world. I'm competitive. I just played football and shit back in the day. I'm competitive. I'm like, whatever. We can fight 10 rounds if you want to, like artistically. And I'll put Buffalo up against literally anybody. And Griselda is really proving that. Oh, and they did it kind of quietly until they were put on, like actually put on, actually in Times Square and shit. They did it very, very sort of focused, stuff-like focused, eye on the prize. And bam, they just exploded. So our time is here.
And I'm very excited to see what New Heights will all go together too. I agree. So this is really exciting. I'm looking forward to attending the workshop and just sort of kind of absorbing all the lessons you have to offer. Thank you for sharing your wealth of experience, certainly, in this event. The final question for me. So you deal a lot with young musicians, young aspiring artists coming up in the BPS. We live in very challenging times, to put it as mildly as possible. We're on the precipice of World War III. The world is going to be on fire in a couple decades, I think, or something. I don't know. I don't read so good. And we're in this constant cycle of committing erasure and revelation on our shared history, and it's this constant back and forth. What's just a basic lesson that you can give to young students to sort of keep their feet on the ground and not get overwhelmed by the pursuit of art, which is to comment on and observe life and reflect on it?
Well, I think you just got to stay in the moment. And I know that sounds like, sort of cliche or whatever, but, we've been through quite the thing, the pandemic, in and of itself. I mean, we're not just talking about the millions of lives that were lost. Obviously, rest in power to all those lives that were lost. That should go without saying. Yeah. But we lost a sense of community. We lost human connection, and we lost the ability to connect humans through music. And, you can jam out in your basement and shit with high quality live feeds all you want. And there are a lot of people that did great things, and they're continuing to do great things, what is it? Buffalo FM, right? Western New York Media, of course, Band Together brought Buffalo and Andre and all of them. That what they did, put their best foot forward to try to keep the lifeblood of music as being the life force for every community since the dawn of time alive, right? That's how we connected. So there's so much. I mean, all this other strife was already in existence, right? But and division was already in existence. And that shit ain't going anywhere, right? But you lose music, you lose the ability to connect in any way, shape, or form, to congregate in any way, shape, or form for as long as. And now, even though now we are congregating in mass again, sort of, it's still like it's cautious. Now I don't know. Like if I'm standing next to you, I don't know if you got fucking COVID or not. And I'm thinking about it too. And you might be thinking about that of me. I mean, I lasted all this time and got all vaccinated, increased 5G signal and all that. And I just got out of quarantine, man. That shit got me, Yeah, dude. So like, you're thinking about it now. We're on edge about this stuff now. We're on edge. you can't say woke anymore, right? Because woke takes on like a weird connotation now. Yeah. But we are aware, we are hyper aware of in our society now of so many wrongs and injustices perpetuated upon literally everybody. Like, not even being white Anglo-Saxon Protestant anymore is going to save your ass. It's you know, not even being. It's all driven by the dollar. It's all driven by inequities and imbalance. And thank God, you know, the younger generation. I can say that now. I'm almost 50. The younger generation, they're just not having it anymore, and they're just like, you know, listen, this shit is wrong, and we're going to stand up for ours until you fucking make it right. And we know it's also annoys a lot of you too, but we just don't give a fuck. We're going to make it right, you know, moving forward. And it's hard to do that when you've lost all connectivity, when you've lost sort of the, what do you call it? Like the sort of collective empathy of the person next to you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is a time where, you know, we sort of look at our neighbors with a bit of skepticism. And I agree. I think right now we need musicians more than ever. Every movement needs an anthem, right?
Every movement needs an anthem. And let's just look at what you said earlier too, as part of the question, right? We are literally on the precipice of World War III. Like, it's, when you say it, it's fucking real. And we're not talking about like Ken Burns' World War II documentaries and shit. Like, they are doing this shit, but we're so focused and we're so desensitized on one hand, right? We're so desensitized, but we're so focused on all this other bullshit just to keep food on the table and to stay alive that it just becomes sort of like another trending topic on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
And it didn't stop me from riding my bike today. And but it's pretty crazy what's going on out in the world and how it's affecting us economically and psychologically as a society.
I mean, exactly to your point, it's impossible to. I mean, it's incredible that the George Floyd protests happened with the kind of circumstances people are placed in, but you know, so the sort of you know, activism needed to address climate action, or you know, to address, you know, the barbarism occurring in the Ukraine right now. It's almost unthinkable, and yet, you know, people will surprise you.
And yet it's happening. You know, but it takes every little bit of effort. It takes every little bit of activism. It takes, you know, I was today years old when I go out and buy a bottle of water, and I just heard some random thing. Like, I don't know, it was some podcast. I don't even know how I fucking heard it. But this girl was like, you know how much plastic you ingest on a weekly basis? And I was like, what? And you know, I still bought the bottle of water, but however, I'm not going to buy as many bottles of water now because you just don't know. They distract you with a bunch of bullshit, and they just press you down and tell you what you need to do, what you need to watch, what you need to eat. And so many of us, I can certainly, you know, I feel a little more awake now, but so many of us, you just fucking do it. You go to job, you just do it. You just do what they tell you to do. And meanwhile, these crazy atrocities are happening. Whether it be the same sort of oppression that existed almost 500 years ago now, with racial inequality. I mean, that speaks for itself. But, you know, not a lot of people have been talking about our indigenous brothers and sisters, the original fucking oppressed in this country, the original. You know what I'm saying? So, like, it's just kind of mind-blowing that we are where we are as a society, so stagnant in some ways, but through music and through collaboration and through the arts of the various people of the various tribes and villages for which we run in now, for which we roll with now, we have a chance. And we just got to keep it going. We got to keep collaborating. We got to keep curating together. We need to not have this me philosophy and just keep branching out and just keep everything open to work together. We might not get richest off the same thing immediately, but it will be consistent, and it will build community, it will build legacy, and it will continue to be a stream of economic consciousness and artistic consciousness way beyond any of our physical lifetimes. And that's the fucking point.
And I can't think of a better note to wrap up on. So, folks, in summation, especially for our younger artists at home watching, be present, ditch the I got mine mentality, because, you know, suffering anywhere is suffering here, right? Depression anywhere is depression here. And look forward on the 23rd to what I'm sure is going to be a really, really enriching a workshop hosted by Eric Crittenden and the other by David Cloyd. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm Devin Mullen, and this has been the Eighth Note Sessions. We'll catch you next time.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? You know what I mean? I'm all about the money and fair ropes and underwear. But give me what's real, now fake bodies made of Tupperware. Take off your do-rag and go back to the